Well, all right, what's going on? Brandon here again. It is time to look at another one of these small snowman paintings that I did. I've got another video up already of a real-time tutorial of this little guy, so if you want to go check that one out and you hadn't seen it, you can have a look at that. This video, we're going to take a look at the other one that I did. This is of the snowman with a little bit of the sunset scene going on. Again, these are small canvas, going to be sold here locally for me by a seller called the Christmas Sage at some local craft fairs, and I think they've got a Facebook page that they got going on. It's gonna have some of this Christmas related crafts and art. So these are going to be some of my contributions. I got some other stuff going on for them as well, but right now we're going to take a look at a real-time walkthrough tutorial of this snowman. So if you want to paint along with me on this one, let's give it a go. Alright, so we're going to get started here on another little snowman scene here. This is again a 5x7 canvas, so fairly small project here. We're going to do this real-time tutorial. And all I have done to this point, I have just basically toned the edges of my canvas here with a little bit of blue, just a thin light blue glaze to tone my edges of the canvas. You can paint the edges of the canvas if you want, doesn't really matter in my opinion, but that's just a personal preference. You do what you want with that. So now I'm going to take a 1-inch flat brush, and we are going to get started with fading in a bit of a sky color. So I'm going to come in a bit of Phthalo Blue here in the top left corner. And I've got a little bit of water on this brush here to make this kind of a thin coat of Phthalo Blue on this first pass anyway, because we're probably going to come back on here at least with 2 different passes on this color fade, maybe even 3 depending on how it works out for us. So I'm coming in here with a fairly thin bit of paint to put this first color in. And since we're going to do a couple of layers on this first one, it doesn't really matter if we have a little bit of our brush strokes showing in here. I'm going to smooth it out a little bit, but we're going to fix all that as we move to a different layer. Now I'm going to touch in a little bit of a magenta color. And again, it's going to still be fairly thin. Creating kind of a purple in here. Go back into that same magenta with a little bit of white. And now while I've got these blues on my brush, I'm going to come back into the Phthalo Blue and a little bit of a raw umber. And create a dark background tone color here for the base, which is basically going to be our snow down here in the foreground. So we're just going to put a little bit of a dark base color to do that with. And again, I keep this initial layer personally fairly thin with the water just so I can move things around, spread it a little easier, and get an initial color on the canvas. Because we're going to come back over this with a couple of different layers and change things up to our liking anyway. So, okay, I'm going to go into now with a little bit cleaner brush, a little bit of a yellow ochre right in this area. And then last but not least, a little bit of medium yellow down in here. Okay, now I'm going to give that a few minutes to dry. And then we will come back, now that we've got a little bit of a baseline of where we want what colors, we will come back and do a better job of laying and fading the colors across. This just kind of gets me something on the canvas. Basically what this is for me, this is toning the canvas, but toning it with essentially the colors I'm going to be using, as opposed to just toning it with something random and then coming back in and painting what I want to paint. This is kind of getting my idea of where I'm putting my colors and how I'm going to fade them, but toning my canvas at the same time, so I'm not just working with a plain white canvas. So we're going to let this dry a little bit, and then we're going to come back to that. Alright, so now that I've given this here a minute to dry, what basically we're working with now, I have a toned canvas, but I've toned it essentially with the colors that I'm going to be putting in those areas. So it was kind of a purposeful toning of canvas as opposed to just a random putting some color on there. So now I'm going to come back with my darker stuff initially. Down here on this blue background that's going to be for the snow, I'm coming back in with some Phthalo Blue, a little bit of raw umber, a touch of titanium white to lighten it up just a tad, and we're going to now put our, essentially our first layer of a snow background color here on top of where we've toned it. Something to that effect. Now up in our top left corner, we're going to go into Phthalo Blue. And I'm just going to lighten that value up a little bit with some white as I come across the canvas. And I'm going to carry this color of blue down about halfway across my sky. And then maybe now go back into just Phthalo Blue again and bring the darker blue down into it a little further. Just fading it in is all I'm doing. Now I'm going to clean that brush up a little bit, and I'm going to go into some magenta, a little bit of white. Just a hint of the Phthalo Blue. Come right in here in the middle, bring that color in. And then I'm going to work it up into the blue. It's still got a little bit of wet to it. It's not completely dry. And now with what I've got on that canvas, I think personally I want to lighten those up just a little. So I'm just going to grab a little bit of titanium white and come right across all that. and basically blend that white right into that color I just put on. It gives me a little softer glow of the color that I'm looking for. Now this is just me personally. I just looked at that and said, you know, I want to soften that up just a tad. Didn't want it to be quite such a rich magenta personally. So now I'm going to clean that brush up a little bit and move into some yellow ochre that I'm going to bring right in here in the middle of this area. And now we're going to basically mix a little bit of that yellow ochre with a little bit of that magenta, giving us a little bit of an orange kind of mix here in the middle. Then again, I'm going to just basically work right into that skyline that I had. There we go. Smooth those brush strokes out a little bit in that sky. Now, again with another, clean the brush out a little bit, I'm going to bring in some just medium yellow here, right along the bottom. And we're eventually going to have to thicken that up a little bit so we get away from that green hue. Right now it's on top of that blue, so that's what we're getting, but we're going to solve that problem in just a minute as this all dries. Basically just putting in about where our last bit of glow of the sun is, right there. Okay, now we've essentially got our second layer in there. We're going to give that a minute or two to dry, and then we will come back and put on our final background color layer. Okay, I think we're ready for our final pass here on our background colors. So I'm going to now just get some medium yellow here and come in where our last bit of sun glow is going to be sitting. And then I'm going to bring that into yellow ochre. And my canvas moving on me. And this is just straight up yellow ochre here that I've moved into. And then with the yellow ochre, I'm going to now drop in some magenta with that. Give us a little bit of an orange here. And I'm going to lighten that up a little bit with some titanium white, because again it's just a little bit too rich for my personal wants on this. I'm going to bring that white back in there. Again, this is just a personal preference of mine, wanting to lighten this up. You can do it however you want to do it. And now we'll go back into our magenta and just a touch of our phthalo blue. And now bring even more blue into that. One last bit of blue up here in the corner. Okay. Now you can tweak that sky to your liking. Once I come in here and put this tree line in, I may adjust that area where the sun glow is a little bit. I'm going to see how much of that green I can cover up with my tree line, and then we'll adjust it from there. So for this tree line itself, I'm really just going to go into some permanent black, a little bit of raw umber, and we're just going to touch in a dark distant tree line . Basically just tapping the canvas . Creating a few areas at the tops of these trees where that light is shining through there a little bit. And I think I want to bring that up a little bit higher. Now, something like that really is all we need. Now we can fix our horizon line there with our snow, bringing in a little bit of more phthalo blue and some raw umber, a little bit of titanium white. Just to draw us a line across there, give us an idea of about what our horizon looks like. This is going to be a low angle shot of a snowman that's very close to the foreground here, so we're going to put a little bit of detailed real close to the bottom of the canvas here. to make it look like there's snow piled up right in the front. And how we're going to do that is just get into a lot more of our titanium white and just drop in some areas that we touch the canvas here at the front. This is going to give us some places that we're going to have some piled up snow that is catching some reflections of that sunset, and that we'll have some shadows behind. And then really behind that front line, there's not going to be a whole lot visible back there. Just kind of fading that color a little bit off the top edge, dragging it out. Something like that. Now with our background snow color there, we're going to make our form of our snowman. Now he's going to be sitting right up front and center here, so we're just going to make a couple of circular type of blobs is the best way I can put it. And this is mostly, again, this is phthalo blue with a little bit of raw umber and some titanium white to lighten it up a little bit. And we're going to come in here and make the base of our snowman. He's going to be sitting pretty close to the front and bottom of our canvas here. And then we're going to make the middle section of our snowman right on top of that. And then finally the head. And again, this is just our base layer background of our snowman. I'll try to make a sharper edge there on that front corner. There we go. Now we'll get to come back in on top of this and put our highlight in. Now back here behind him, I'm going to bring out that same shadow color. Just drag it over my foreground snow right there. Because he's going to be blocking that glow from the sun from about the midpoint back. All right. Now all we have to do to create our snowman here is bring in some lighter values of this color to create a little bit of a color fade where he's going to have the glow from the sunset over here on the right, and then that will fade off as it moves here to the back where he's not going to show nearly as much highlight. So we're going to basically start with adding just a hair of magenta to this background color we've been working with here, and then lighten it up just a little with some titanium white, just enough to create a contrast on what we already have up there. It needs to be a little lighter than that. That's better. And I'm going to tap and touch in these highlight pieces where it's going to look like snow that has been packed together in there when we're done with this. It'll take a couple of passes, so I don't want a lot of contrast on this back corner because again he's shadowed back here. But you got to have enough contrast that you can tell that there's something going on. So basically like that. Now all we do as we move forward is adding just a little bit more magenta and a little bit more titanium white. I'll start right down the middle with it, and then I will work that towards the back as my brush is losing paint. And then again, one more time, we'll add just a little bit more magenta and even more titanium white. To come around to the front. And I'm starting right on this front leading edge at this point. Just kind of tapping that in. And then I'll work away from that front corner. So now we have created a little bit of a gradient of highlight that fades off towards the back. Still been doing this here with this larger brush, but now I am going to switch brushes off of this to something smaller. So whatever you've got, I don't know, I'm going to pick just a little small angled brush to finish up doing our detail here. We're going to give this just a minute to dry, and then we will come back and tweak a few things on the snowman and in this foreground, and then we will be done. Okay, so now with my smaller angled brush, I'm going to work on our highlight details on our snowman, and this time I'm going to start on the right side here with my brightest highlights, which is going to be bringing in almost a pure titanium white at this point, with just a hint of our magenta and blue color in here. And touch it just along this front leading edge. And then basically tap my brush off of that leading edge a little bit. Now I want to add some real pink kind of highlight glows to this, because that's kind of the color that I like to think would be shining off of him. So this is basically going to be some titanium white with a little bit of that magenta in it, where I can start adding some nice little pink highlight and glow to this. So I'm going to just touch that color in a little bit. And because packed snow has so many little different angles and stuff of how it reflects the light, I like using these smaller brushes for this technique, because you get a lot of different textures in there and slightly different tones and values based off of how you tap it and where the paint goes. Just makes for an overall nice packed snow look effect, in my opinion, when you're done with it. So I'm just kind of tapping that lighter pink color in here, bringing it back a little bit, and then I'll go back. You know, it's kind of a back and forth process. Just a little bit of this titanium white again on the front leading edge. and then again tapping it back out of there. I don't really want any of my original dark underbody snow color that visible on this front leading edge, so I'm trying to carry that lighter highlight all the way out. And he looks a little dark in his midsection here, so I'm going to tap some color in there and brighten that up a little bit. Okay. Now I want to bring that same pink highlight across some of this foreground snow along the bottom. And I'm basically just kind of covering up the areas that we had that white in the foreground here. And then we will add a few little highlight touches now of some more titanium white. And a little bit of that pink coloration in here. And then a few just tiny little places where we put just a bit of almost pure titanium white in there. Along these top edges. Just to give it a little something. And now I'm going to take a little bit of my darker background color that I used for my snowman there and color in just a little bit of this real dark base that's underneath there. I think that's pretty good for the snow in front of us. Yeah, we just have to make sure we're happy with our snowman. So I'm looking at him here now and I'm saying, well, maybe I want to be able to see a little bit of what's going on back here. So I'm going to bring in just a little bit lighter color in the back. Just so I can kind of see the rest of him back there. I don't want him completely lost. Maybe something like that. And you can kind of fine tune and tweak your snowman here however you want in terms of how much splotchiness, I guess is the word I want to use, he has to him in terms of the snow packed, how smooth it is. I'm going to smooth a little bit of him out now. And all I'm really doing is just bringing the brush back in with a little fuller brush stroke now, as opposed to just that tapping and choppiness to it, just to smooth out that snow a little bit more so he doesn't look quite so mixed bag there. Okay, now to keep our fade the way we got it, bring a little bit more of that highlight up front, a little bit more of our pink. Well, I think we have the makings of a pretty good snowman there, so we need to add some features to our guy here. He needs some eyeballs, some buttons, a nose, some arms. Now, the arm, pretty simplistic, just going to go into a little bit of permanent black, a little bit of raw umber, and put ourselves some form of a stick of an arm coming off this side. I want him looking kind of in this direction. I'm going to bring an arm out from somewhere in this vicinity. It's going to come back at a little bit of an angle. Something like that. Don't need a whole lot of highlight on that. Essentially the same color. We're going to put an eye right in here, and then just a sliver of the eye on the other side that you can barely see. His mouth, we're going to say we probably use some kind of stick shoved in here to make a little bit of a smile on him. And then his buttons essentially are going to be the same kind of deal. We're just going to give him one, two, and three stuck in on the front. We'll add just a tiny bit of a highlight to those things because there is a little bit of that glow from the sunset on it. So I'm going to go into a little bit of my pink highlight color and just barely put that over that eyeball there and the front end of these couple of buttons. Not much, but just a little bit there. And for his nose, we're going to go for a darker orange looking carrot. So I'm going to get a little bit of yellow ochre here, and just a little bit of that magenta will work. And we're going to say he's got a carrot nose that's coming out from in here. And I'm going to have to darken that up a little bit. That's a little bit too bright. I'm going to put just a touch of raw umber in that. It's not quite so bright. There we go. Bring his nose out a little bit. And he needs a little pop of color on a scarf, and we've been doing red, so we're going to stick with the red. We're just going to get into some plain old permanent red here. Just a touch of, again, the raw umber to darken this up a little bit. So we have ourselves a nice dark red color. And start back here on his back with that real dark red. Bring it around to the front. And then we can highlight this from the front moving towards the back. We'll give him a piece of that hanging off right here. Now we're going to brighten up that front end just a little bit. Just go into some red, maybe a touch of that magenta, and a touch of titanium white. And add a little bit of brighter highlight on this leading front edge of his scarf there. Okay, so really at this point I'm gonna say we've got a finished product. I mean, you can do a little tweaking here and there on some highlights if you want, but it's not really necessary. It's a fairly simplistic little project. I'm going to add a signature to this one and say it's a done deal. So hope you guys enjoyed that one. If you painted along with me, hopefully you've got something that you're happy with. And we will catch you guys again next time around.